happens in 2 weeks. So change, kind of the topic of discussion this morning overall, but I want to talk about some change that's going to be happening over the next calendar year. So the restationing actions that are affecting our footprint here in this calendar year, and you were saying it's actually not as big as expected.
Yeah, so we've been through a great deal of change like we were talking about before, but I think part of what we're seeing is we're reaching a more stable point now within the U.S. Army Garrison Rheinland-Pfalz footprint as a result of getting through the biggest wave of those changes in Heidelberg and Mannheim. But we do have some restationing actions still ongoing this calendar year with units that are, and organizations that are moving, and the garrison is fully supporting those efforts for the units. In some cases, the units are moving from our footprint to other garrison footprints. So, for example, the 18th MP Brigade headquarters is in the process of moving from Sembach to Grafenwöhr. And our medevac helicopter company out at Landstuhl, Charlie Company of the 1st of the 214th Aviation, they're in the process of starting their move from Landstuhl to Grafenwöhr. Another good example is one of the last two units that's there in Mannheim, our network operations center that deals with the signal networks there in Funari Barracks. They'll be moving to Wiesbaden this calendar year. And then we have a couple organizations that are moving into our footprint, basically into the Sembach area to backfill the units that are leaving from there, and that's the DOD's Europe headquarters and the AFI's Europe headquarters are actually going to move down from Wiesbaden area to Sembach and backfill some of those spaces. And then we even have moves that happen internally within our footprint. So we're getting ready this calendar year to move the 254th Medical Company out of Miesau and move them up to Baumholder, which is actually a very positive move because it puts them with their battalion headquarters up there in Baumholder, puts them in a better place as far as training areas and things like that. And then the confinement facility, that is the last unit remaining there in Mannheim at Coleman Barracks, will also be moving up to Sembach as we finish the work on that facility this calendar year in Sembach. So, that's about 7 different organizations that are either moving in, out, or internally to our footprint. But that's actually a very small number compared to the numbers we were moving around the past 2 years.
Okay, so not only are the moves positive in most of those cases, but also it's another positive, like you're saying, that we don't have as many things that need to change. Because, like you said, even though change is constant, if you get to the point where you're stable enough to where you don't need that change, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and it also is a good thing for the rest of the community because normal PCSs that are coming in and out, that's always challenging enough and handling that transition that's coming in and out. But when you have a huge number of units moving at the same time, like we had the previous 2 years, it really puts a heavy strain on the logistics backbone for household goods and POV shipping and just the basic assets that do all of those moves, whether it's people coming in their natural PCS transition or people that are part of a restationing move.
So you actually just answered part of a question that I wanted to ask you next, which is that, you're talking about changing these big organizations all moving at once. And what I wanted to ask you is how that affects the rest of the community who's not moving, who's at the place where the unit is leaving from, or, the gaining unit, the gaining area where the unit is going to. How does that affect the rest of the community? And that's a great example of one of the ways. It's just the PCS moving, the different organizations that deal with PCS moves. But are there any other ways that would affect the rest of the community?
Well, it certainly does affect the rest of the community, and specifically those installations that the units move to. Like we had mentioned with the medical company going up to Baumholder, I think that's a very positive move because it puts them back in a location where their battalion headquarters is and where they'll be able to really group their efforts together and have better synergy with their headquarters. For DODS Europe and AFES Europe, I think it's kind of a, there are pros and cons. I'm sure there's plenty of people in those organizations who love Wiesbaden and would rather stay there. But the DODS district that we have here actually includes Wiesbaden, and I think this is a great location. And Sembach, by placing them there, it places them with several other organizations that are more Europe region focused, like ERMC and ERDC and IMCOM Europe. So there is kind of a method to the madness of putting those larger regional level organizations at a place like Sembach, where they can have some synergy and group their efforts as well. And then the confinement facility, that has a great effect on the community in just terms of putting that facility into a much smaller, more modern facility. The current confinement facility was built at a time when we had about 250,000 Army soldiers here in Europe. And so that facility can hold well over 200 people at a time. And that just isn't needed today. And so this was really an opportunity to build them a more modern, current facility, but also a facility that's much more efficient in terms of being closer to the number of troops that we support. And that facility supports all services, not just the Army.
So some good changes coming our way. We talked about some of the changes that have already taken place. Now we just heard about some of the changes that are going to be taking place. All of it seems to be overall a huge positive thing. But it's not just us as adults that are being affected by these positive changes. We're going to talk in just a couple of minutes about some upcoming improvements to the youth program. So changes for the whole family, and that's going to be a couple of different areas. Landstuhl, Sembach, they have a couple of different things here also that are changing for the youth as well. So I want to make sure that the whole family gets involved with those positive changes. I'm speaking this morning with Colonel DeCoster. He is the U.S. Army Garrison Rheinland-Pfalz commander, and he's changed commands in just a couple of weeks. So we're talking about change this morning. Positive change that has already taken place, that will take place soon. So come back and join us in just a couple minutes. It's time now, though, for your KMC